Good afternoon. It's about 5:22 here in Cincinnati. And the purpose of what we're doing here this afternoon, early evening, is to present an overview of uh, LDS 404 uh, Leadership and Change. The major focus of the course uh, is on change, but we will also present various leadership characteristics and models as well. You probably are asking yourself a question of why present leadership characteristics and models? Well, I guess the easiest answer is because change requires leadership. People, employees in this particular case, but people in general, are reluctant to change. And it's not sufficient to say, this is what we're going to do going forward. Yes, that happens. It happened a lot of times. It happened in the past. We don't have that type of workforce today in the United States. It's probably a good thing we don't. People, again, employees, need to know the reason the change is being contemplated and is eventually going to be instituted, when it will be implemented, and why. There has to be a purpose behind it, and people need to understand that. Part of this text will not cover that. It will talk in some generalities, I think is probably the best way to say for what I've just kind of talked about. I'm going to talk about here in the next few minutes. It does address it. Probably not from the human aspect of resistance to change, perhaps as much as some of us would like. But that's neither here nor there. What is here and what is there is that we're going to talk about change. We're going to talk about, in some cases, how change was implemented, instituted in some companies that were very different. Now, for instance, we're going to, or I say we, the text is going to present a case. I don't remember the chapter off the bat, and I don't want to say because I'm probably going to be wrong, about British Airways. It was known for a long time as BOAC, British Overseas Airways Corporation, I think was the right term, not British Airways. Well, it was a government-owned entity, and it was run by United Kingdom. Might have been called run by Great Britain in those days. It was England, and it was Great Britain, and it was the United Kingdom, and as it is today. The names have been changed a little bit, but Margaret Thatcher came to power as the prime minister, and she was very, very anti the socialist trend that had taken place in England and the United Kingdom since the end of World War II. And so she wanted to change that, and that's what we're going to see. That's a cultural change besides implementing organization change. We've got to stop thinking as we did culturally. And if you've taken courses in organization behavior and culture, and maybe perhaps a few other courses, you know that culture is very, very inbred in any successful corporation. And corporations, in many cases, that's their mantra. And companies take that culture and they tie symbols and things to it that separate them from their competitors and separate them from other companies. And they do it consistently. So here we're going to talk about some of those types of things that change and how changes are implemented and instituted. Other courses in the curriculum, particularly organization behavior and culture, which I used to teach, present ways to get employee buy-in to change. Among them are rational persuasion and forced coercion. We're not going to discuss those methods of getting employee buy-in, but I hope you've been exposed to those methods. And if you haven't been exposed to those methods, we can talk about them to some extent through the forums section, which I'll get to shortly, or some other ways, because what the purpose of this course, among other things, besides learning about organization change and leadership, and we're going to talk about some styles of leadership, is to create a learning community. We want to learn from each other. We want to learn from your experiences and hopefully from mine and my quote unquote professed knowledge, and to build on this and to make this a good course. I want to be honest with you, this is only the second time I've taught this course. And I'm making some changes in the course as we go along. I'll be making changes hopefully as I go through the course, and I shouldn't say prefer, I want your feedback. You get a chance at the end of the course to do an evaluation, and that's fine. That goes to, I get to see that, and other people get to see it as well. But I'm really interested in what you tell me. We could do this, we could do that, we could do something else to help improve the course. I realize in asking for that feedback that you may want to wait until the course is over and your final grade has been entered. And that's fine. I understand that. I've been there before. But I do encourage your feedback. I encourage you to interact with your peers and with me as we go through this course so we can do what I suggested here before, and that's to build a learning community. We talked about forced coercion and rational persuasion. One is obviously do as I say, while the other appeals to a person's objectivity and to his or her logic and thought processes and things like that. We will discuss employee resistance to change in Chapter 6. For any change to be successful, employees must see the benefit and experience meaningful satisfaction that they have been part of the change and it works. Now, normally speaking, and I'm just going to digress here for a second, one of the ways that organizations get change across to people is to have a series of things that they talk about being small wins. And when people can see a change has been made and they can see the benefit of that change and they can see it very quickly, it means that the rest of the change will sort of go on its own. It'll be a momentum type thing. It's very difficult for most of us, if not all of us, to look at the big picture because most of us don't deal with the big picture. We deal with eaches. We deal with specifics. We deal with the here and now, things we need to do today. Yeah, we may look forward a little bit, but we're not looking out here. We're not looking past certain horizons. And companies have people who are paid to do that. Most of us are not paid to do that. So we have a little problem with it. We get in our comfort zone. And that's why if promoting small wins where people can see these things done quickly and see the benefit of them really helps sell the entire process. Now, I want to give you a little thing about change. I used to work for many years ago when I was had a different career. I worked for, after I was out of college the first time, I worked for a small private clinical laboratory, just like a hospital laboratory that does blood tests and stuff, except we were private, we were on the outside, we're not affiliated with a hospital. We did work for some hospitals, especially small hospitals and rural communities in Ohio and Kentucky. And we had been in an older building, and the powers that be wanted to move to a new building that was going to be popular. Excuse me just a second. A sip of water in my mouth is dry. Populated by a number of physicians. And so we moved there. And of course, in any type of move, things are helter-skelter and you don't have things set around. Well, there were three of us who were lab technicians that worked there. And our boss was a lab technician too, but most of the time he was more concerned with operations and going out and meeting people and trying to drum up business and things of that nature. But he did, and he would, especially when somebody was off, come over and pitch in. Well, we had these various chemistries that we did, and when we first moved over there, we had everything we were supposed to do for one particular test in this area. There were cabinets up above and a countertop and some drawers below to store equipment that we used, and beakers and flasks and vials and all kinds of stuff. Pipettes, if you're familiar with what a pipette is. But one element that we had to use all the time was across the room. Now, across the room wasn't 30, 40 feet, it was like 10 feet, but you still had to walk over there and get it. And I got tired of walking one day, and I said to my coworkers, let's move all this stuff over here. Well, I thought it was a good idea, so now we have everything we needed for this one particular test we did. You could either reach up here or down here, everything was in one place. And where we performed the test, I don't remember whether we had to cook something or whatever it was, everything was there we needed to. Other equipment was there. And so, knowing my boss as well as I did, or at least as well as I thought I did, I knew we'd have to tell him what we had done. So I said, hey, I'm not going to call him by name. Hey, so-and-so, and of course I didn't call him so-and-so. I said, we've made this change, so now when you have to get this particular beaker, I'm just going to use that term, it was a beaker, but it's irrelevant. Instead of having to walk across the room, it's right here. So everything's in one place. And his response to me was, well, if it stands the test of time, it'll be a good idea or a good change. I forgot exactly what it said. I always took that as kind of a slam because I thought I was being logical and efficient and all sorts of things, and he wasn't interested in it at all. Well, long story short is, for the remainder of the time that I worked there, we kept things exactly where they were. Everybody was satisfied with it. But that's what I'm talking about, small wins. This was not an elaborate change, it was a thing that made sense. But if we, the workers, weren't happy with what had been done, regardless of the fact that one of the workers did it, it would have been, why are we doing this? This doesn't make any sense. So that's what we're talking about here. People have to see the fruits of their labor quickly, especially when it comes to change, or you're not going to get the type of buy-in that you want and that you need. The author of our text states that he has tried to be objective in the material he put together for the text, but admits that it is biased. He really means selective. And we find this in practically any type of text that you use, and that is not meant to be that the material being presented to you is in any way biased or prejudiced. What it is meant to tell you is that the people who put the text together have used various and sundry sources, references, that they have used over a period of years and they like and supports what they're bringing forth. This gentleman, Burke, is not only a professor, and I think kind of serves as a dean at Teachers College at Columbia University. He's also worked as a consultant. So we ought to take this as that, yes, it's selective material. You may find other material that you find better, more convenient. I don't say better, but you like better, more convenient, that you can understand or assimilate better. It doesn't mean to say that Burke's material is not useful. Doesn't mean to say that Burke's material should be cast out. For instance, one of the people he refers to is Kurt Lewin. Kurt Lewin's been deceased for many, many, many years, but Kurt Lewin has a theory of change that has been around for a long time, and it's probably the one that I know best. It doesn't make me right, but it's one that I know. It's one that I've been comfortable with over a period of years, and it's really easy to understand. So I think he uses some things here that most of us can grasp. We can see these concepts and these theories, and then we can use them in our work, either now or in the future, to build upon to help institute change that needs to be done. Or we can use it as a critical prism to view the change that's being promoted, that somebody wants to implement. We can step back and look at that and say, well, wait a minute, are we going about this the right way? Now, what I'm talking about there is process, not the change itself. We have to remember that the process of getting the change, in many cases, is just as important as the change itself. We need to understand that. The change is going to happen, but we also have to make sure the process or processes of the change are in place and they make sense. Otherwise, we're, grappling with out here someplace, and we don't have the roadmap process to get us to that someplace out there. So that means, again, the material is not useful, no. He's providing information based on his experience, both as a member of the faculty and as a consultant. One of the people that Burke cites in his text is Mary Parker Follett, spelled Follett. She was a noted management guru. Notice I said she, management guru in the 1920s and 1930s that many forgot, but much of her work is relevant today. I was first exposed to Follett in the late 1990s. Even though I hold an MBA, I don't remember hearing anything about Follett. And then when I began teaching some courses in the later 90s, that's when I first was introduced to Follett by a gentleman that we use here for his number of his textbooks, John Schimmerhorn. She believed that when the focus is on the organization's mission, then dependence on an individual leader, rather than dependence on a leadership, on an individual's leadership characteristics. So what she's saying here is that while charismatic leadership, by the way, this is me talking, not anybody else, while charismatic leadership is important, it's not as important if we focus on the mission of the organization. And we don't have to depend upon the charismatic leader or the transformational leader as much, because here, in those cases, we're focusing on the individual. Now, do I mean to say that a charismatic or transformational leader is not important? Absolutely not. What I am saying is that too often we attach to that person as opposed to attaching to the organization. Follett believed that when a worker or workers had the relevant knowledge and skills, it should be they, rather than the manager or leader who is in control of the work processes, and that the manager leader should be a coach and facilitator. That's where we have gotten today, as we were forced, due to the economic downturn that happened in the early part of this century, 2007, 2008 began, and we found a lot of people out of work. A lot of those people who were out of work were managers. And we referred to them many times as middle managers. And we don't need them as much today as we did because we have this medium that I'm using here to deliver a little introduction to this course. And people use this to communicate. They use smartphones and all the rest of that kind of stuff. So we don't need the manager to pass along information that he or she was really tagged with doing over a period of years. And we find that more companies are using teams, and the team leader tends to be a facilitator and sometimes a coach. So these resonate with us today. It should resonate with most of us, if not all of us, that who don't know who she was or the impact she made on management theory, but we can certainly think about those concepts that she espoused. They're relevant today. Well, I can't tell you why Mary Parker Follett more or less fell out of favor. She did. She countered some of Fred Taylor's management theories, scientific management. We know Taylor, we spoke of Taylor, we've been speaking of Taylor for many, many years, but we don't speak as much about Follett. So let's kind of look at what these chapters are going to present to us in sort of a thumbnail sketch. Chapters 1 and 2 present an introduction, an overview of organization change, and they expose us to some change models and underpinnings of how change should be brought about. Chapter 3 should be a refresher for many of us. That is, pardon me, presents a brief history of change as detailed in scientific management and the Hawthorne studies, among others. Now I'm going to provide some information about each of those that I think many of us have not heard before, both about scientific management, Fred Taylor, and about the theories that Elton Mayo, who was the director of the Hawthorne experiments, came up with. Now we move on to chapter 4, which is theoretical foundations of organizations and organizational change. The concepts presented in chapter 12 will also be discussed, which is loosely at the same time, which is loosely coupled systems. Chapter 5 talks about the nature of change, revolutionary versus evolutionary. I don't want you to think of these as being opposed to each other. They're just different. We think of, or at least I think of Toyota Motor Company as being an evolutionary change as opposed to revolutionary change. Chapter 6, levels of change ranging from the individual employee to the organization as a whole. Chapter 7, organization change, research and theory. So we get some background here, research that's been conducted on organization change and some theory. Chapter 8, conceptual models for understanding organization change. Chapter 9, integrated models for leading and managing change. Notice the two different words there, leading and managing. Now, we know that at least it's become accepted today that leaders and managers are two different people. Well, I would like to tell you that leaders can be managers and managers can be leaders, but the functions are different. Now, we talk about the 4 functions of management being planning, organizing, leading, and controlling. We don't talk about, at least I've not seen, the 4 functions of leadership. But they're the same type things. But the leader, we think of the person who has this visionary thought, who's going to take us out there someplace, like we talked about before. Whereas managers talk about stability and making sure we're getting things done, and processes and things of that nature. We have to have that. If we don't have that, then we really don't have the things that we need, the glue to keep us together. So it's very important that we have both of those. And we should not denigrate one and lionize the other. And what we usually find is the manager is denigrated, but because he or she is concerned with status quo and making things moving the way they're supposed to be moving, whereas the leader has these, excuse the term, grandiose thoughts and plans and wants to move the company forward. And we need to have both. Chapter 10 presents the Burke-Litwin causal model of organization, performance, and change. This Burke is the Burke that we know. Chapter 11 is organization culture. I gave a little bit of introduction to that when I talked about British Airways and the major change in their culture when it went from a government-owned entity to a private entity. We've talked about chapter 12, chapter 13, transformational leadership. Chapter 14, leading organization change. Chapter 15, organization change. Think of that as integration. And finally, organization change in chapter 16, what we need to know. Perhaps we should have known that probably from the very beginning, but it's something we do need to know. Now let's spend the next few minutes of hopefully half an hour we're going to spend here in this introduction turning to course requirements. I'll conduct an audio and video lecture each Wednesday during the course beginning at 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time. I hope you'll be able to attend the live lectures, but it is not a requirement. I realize some of you live on the West Coast, and I know that's right in the middle of your workday. Lectures will be recorded and uploaded to Campus Web the following day. Sometimes, depending upon the length of the lectures, I can get them uploaded the same day. I will also have them available to you on YouTube. That's normally the following day, and I'll send you the link for YouTube and let you know where the lecture is located on Campus Web. Most likely, unless there's some radical change, the audio and video lectures will be located immediately beneath the lecture notes, the posted lecture notes for that week. Pardon me, I will use PowerPoint slides to conduct the lectures. Most of the PowerPoint slides for each chapter are not excessive. Now, what I mean excessive, they're not more than 30, at least as far as I've determined. I might have missed something there. So I will probably use them all. I tend to speak to PowerPoint slides, but not to what it necessarily says. I try to make some sense out of them. I know that it is difficult for a person to listen and read a PowerPoint slide. There are a lot of people that say that lectures are conducted to death by PowerPoint. I'm not so sure I agree to that, but I can understand it. So what you want to do, when I mention this to you, is you might want to pay attention to what I'm saying and then look at the PowerPoint slides. These are going to be recorded and uploaded, so you'll have the opportunity to both listen and watch, and you can separate the two of them. There's a way that you can mute the audio, so you'll just be able to watch the video if that's what you prefer to do. Don't be concerned about keeping up with them as it's going on. We have a couple of different assignments. I asked for you to complete a reflection paper. The information about the reflection papers is posted, but basically talk about them. Reflection paper is to tell me what you liked, what you agreed with in the chapters. I'm not talking about my lecture, I'm talking about the chapters in the textbook. Based upon your current, what you liked or agreed with and why, based upon your current knowledge and experience. Then what you disagreed with, based upon your current knowledge and experience and why you disagreed with it. And then What will you do in the future to further your understanding about the material and the concepts and theories presented? And that's to be indicated in your paper. Those reflection papers are to be uploaded to the coursework assignments page, and the cutoff time is, I think I made them on Mondays. I may have made them on Tuesdays. I'm trying to do that from memory, at 11:50 p.m. Eastern Time. Please remember that all times on Campus Web are Eastern Time. We can't differentiate time zones. Would be nice if we could, but that's not something that can be done. Those have to be uploaded by that time. If you try to upload them after that, that assignment window will be closed. We also have a discussion question each week that you're to respond to and upload to the forum section, and then to respond to another student's post. The forum section, you are to upload those discussions by the time indicated, but the forum section does not close. I leave that open. I like to respond to students. I do respond to students there, and sometimes that pose additional questions trying to get clarification. The purpose of that is to help create a learning community. And you are to respond to at least one other student's post. That's a requirement. And again, we're trying to create a learning community. We learn from each other. We learn from your experiences, because you may have had some. You may not realize you went through organization change, but you did. And you should share those. What worked, what didn't work, why, how. And hopefully I will be able to add some things to you from what I profess to know. So make sure the assignments are in on time. If you're going to be late with assignments, please let me know that. Each of us in this class is an adult, and we take responsibilities for being an adult very seriously. So please try to make sure that you let me know when assignments are going to be late. Please ensure that your written work uses proper spelling and grammar. It is very discouraging to see people who use improper spelling and improper grammar. Now, the last thing I want to mention to you is an engagement assignment. That assignment is to be finished, concluded by the end of the first week. We do engagement assignments for a number of reasons. One is we have to report to the federal government students that are not engaged, and that, of course, affects financial aid money. There are three questions that I pose that are not difficult, and it is scored, and it's worth 5 points, and most everybody earns 5 points. Why wouldn't you earn 5 points? Well, one reason is occasionally students will misspell my last name. That's not something anybody ever wants to do, not because of me, but you never want to misspell anybody's last name. I just misspelled a student's last name. I thought it had 2 R's in it instead of 1, not in this course. But it's not something that we want to do. And so you want to pay attention to that. Also, improper grammar and improper spelling. Please pay attention to that. That's very important. And finally, if you need to be thinking about for your final paper, the requirements for the final paper are posted. You may want to consider working with the Writing Center. Information is posted on the syllabus that tells you how to contact the Writing Center. And if you're unsure, let me know and I'll give you the contact information. So I thank you for your attention. I'll have this posted and noted to you that you'll be able to get this, and I look forward to speaking with each of you next week. Thank you and good evening.